Good morning. Welcome to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Connected Systems Institute lecture series. My name is Charles Mosley, and I'll be your host for today's conversation, Sustainable and Organic Agriculture, Opportunities for Technological Solutions, presented here today by Dr. Nicole Taukes. Before we go to Dr. Taukes, a word from our Executive Director, Mary Bunzel.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Nikki, for giving your time for us today to talk about this a very important opportunity. You know, the ability to produce food in the right amount at the right time is another form of manufacturing, and there's lots of opportunities to apply technology to this important field as well. So we're going to hear from Nikki in specific places where these solutions are needed. And I'm calling out to the tech community to help us develop them. So Nikki, take it away. Thank you.
All right, before we go to Dr. Taukes, I'm sorry, Dr. Nicole Taukes is an agroecologist with the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute, which works to further regenerative and organic agriculture in the upper Midwest and beyond. Nicole grew up in southern Wisconsin and consequently loves dairy cropping systems and forages. She double majors in agronomy and Spanish at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and completed her PhD in crop science at Washington State University, where she investigated agronomic and soil fertility management in dryland organic wheat-based systems. Nicole has conducted on-the-ground agricultural research in wheat, corn, beans, tomatoes, and forage and grazing systems, as well as working with Kernza, a new perennial grain crop. Before we begin, some housekeeping. Please mute your microphones or have them muted and enter questions in the Q&A box, which we'll take as we go along and at the end. Dr. Taukes, it's all yours.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you all for joining with me today, and thanks to Mary Bunzel, Executive Director, for having me here to talk with you. I'm so excited to talk to a different audience than I normally get to speak to, who are growers and ag researchers. I haven't gotten to talk to a bunch of folks in the technological industry, and I think this is a really great opportunity for me to share a little bit of what is coming from the small agriculture, the organic agriculture side of things. And we don't get to have access necessarily to a lot of new technology, and that is the challenge that I want to set out today. So I'll jump right into a little more about my background. That was a great bio. I grew up right here in southeastern Wisconsin. I got a bachelor's degree in agronomy and Spanish from UW-Madison, and I got my start, and my interest in agriculture was inspired by working with the Cropping Systems Lab at UW-Madison, and we worked with long-term research trials. And this is where we follow a series of agriculture treatments over decades to learn more about how the land, soils, and sort of environmental trends change over long time scales. So those are some really innovative type of systems, and I'm continuing that work today. I've also worked a lot with forages, which is what animals eat. They're really important, but people don't think a lot about them because they think about the meats. From there, I got my PhD at Washington State University, where I worked on organic weed and fertility management recommendations for organic wheat systems. I also dabbled in sociology and soil microbiology, which are both really important in agricultural research. And I worked with Kernza, as Charles mentioned, and then I went from there to working at the University of California, Davis, where I worked on soil health, grazing, and rotation effects in another long-term trial. And while I was at Davis, we had a lot of contact and interface with innovators and folks from the Bay Area. We were about 2 hours from San Francisco. And so for the first time in my career, I was talking a lot with budding companies, startups, agricultural entrepreneurs about opportunities to overlay technology into agriculture. And so there was sort of what inspired a lot of what I'm going to share today. From there, I just joined the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute in East Troy, Wisconsin. Our mission is to help rural and urban farms and agricultural communities in Wisconsin and beyond to be healthy. in a number of ways, environmentally, economically, and socially, through our work in research, education, and policy. And if you want to learn more about us or to keep apprised of what's going on in the sustainable and organic agriculture world, I want to invite you to follow us. Sign up for the newsletter at our website, michaelfields.org, or you could follow us on these various social media platforms as well. Jumping right into the talk, I want to cover, just sort of lay out sort of the state of technology in agriculture. The vast majority of that has been in the big ag world, I say with air quotes. So that's these large technology companies working with large farms, because I think that's where it's been viewed that, you know, the most revenue is to gain there. They can deploy the technology across wide scales and working with fewer firms. So that's been the crux of the innovation there in technology, but I'm going to make the pitch here that we should start expanding technological innovation to more and smaller players in the farmscape. Then I want to overlay, or I want to describe the challenges that our farmers are facing, really from a variety of angles in society. But I want to present these challenges because I think they're going to inspire a lot of opportunities for engagement between the technological innovation community and growers. And researchers and policymakers and all of the folks who need to have a voice in shaping what our food system is and can be. So jumping right into it, the state of the tech in agriculture, I see John Deere as being a company that's really a key leader in this space. Big technology in ag really started off as being GPS based or GPS inspired. And it started through the goal of wanting to have self-driving tractors, and also through sort of the ability to make maps of our fields and improve management of fields on a really granular level. So you may have a field that's 40 acres, like they say the back 40. They want, you know, as we started to think about managing our acreage more precisely with all of the technology we have, we start being able to manage fields on a more granular and pixelated level. So what happened is John Deere was a leader in getting GPS set up on farms. That allowed growers to sort of make maps as they were driving. I've actually applied chemicals this way. You essentially color in the lines, which is kind of fun. That's allowing growers to see exactly where they've driven on a map in real time. And that results in less product being applied, greater efficiencies, savings in terms of money, and also the amount of chemicals that we're putting out into the environment. It's also allowing us to create maps of our fields, as I mentioned, but one example of this is yield mapping. So as a grower drives their combine outfitted with this Harvest Mobile software system that's coupled to hardware in the combine, and it's a scale that actually weighs the grain as it's coming in through from the header that's harvesting into the bin. So it weighs that grain, streams the data in real time to the software that then maps it. So the grower gets to see what parts of the field are yielding more poorly. That's demarked here, denoted here in red. What parts of the field are yielding higher in green. And so that gives them an idea of, you know, what parts of their field are most productive and what areas were struggling. They can overlay that onto their maps or their memories of what types of management had occurred. So perhaps they had a sprayer skip in this part. So there were more yields in this strip, leading to worse yields. Maybe this is a higher area in the field that's better drained and is therefore resulting in better yields, those sorts of things. It also gives us access to big data, because then we have these maps that are providing us data on a pretty fine pixel level, at least in terms of the landscape. And we can collect those maps over time and start to observe long-term trends. There are many researchers who are working on decades, well, a decade is about how long we've had this technology, decades of maps throughout the Midwest and even at the national level. Moving on. John Deere is really pivoting from being a farm tech company to a smart technology company. So they're actually viewing themselves that way, and I think, you know, others in the tech world should view them that way too. So I have a video here. I want to demonstrate what the potential is for, is this going to play? Oh, I think it's loading. Hold on a second. Exit out.
PowerPoint likes to take its time to load.
Of course it didn't do this in any tests. Maybe I won't be playing any videos today. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is the John Deere's Trimble suite or agriculture for ag tech packages. Here, we'll wait while it loads. And this video shows us some good examples of what. All right, so you see, this is a large farm that has many tractors, so it's important to not outfit every single piece of equipment with electrical machinery. All the software and hardware is in the steering wheel, so the operator can transfer it easily from one machine to another. This is demonstration of the RTX. This is the GPS correction services. 3.8 sub centimeter accuracy, which is really impressive. So that enables the tractor to drive itself. Very effective. It's very streamlined. They can lay down this bed, lines your finger exactly. Here they're setting up vegetable beds. They can map these in and knock down the beds. Every single year in the spot. And very straight line. All of that's being driven by steering systems, as part of the Trimble package, all of that is coming. That little brain, right? Operator, sit, tab. But you see they're really maybe driving. The software is doing all the work. Here it enables perfect turns every time, which for those trailers isn't super easily. Large farms often have multiple pieces of machinery going in the field, so these two tractors talk to each other. That way, they're not overlapping with each other. They're mapping and streaming data. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll move on, but that's a great demonstration of the tech that's available to large farms and self-driving and some of the data collection that is paired to equipments. Moving on to remote sensing. This is another really hot area of tech. So we have, these are some examples of pictures that are taken with satellites. These are flyover pictures. These are subscription-based services. Growers pay, in this example, I know Terravion's rate is $1 an acre, and they get flyover pictures sent to them, I think bi-weekly. And these are used to take pictures. They have these hyperspectral indices that research has been able to link the reflectance of the canopy to growth and yield prediction. Growers can look and see what parts of their fields may have worse canopy, which is denoted in this red. So they can go out and scout those manually for pest issues and irrigation problems. I should say that our ability to collect data in this case far exceeds our ability to interpret the data, and I'm going to come back to that thought later. Most farmers in this case are really paying for pretty pictures. And I think we have a long way to go in terms of being able to get growers really good, actionable, real data and numbers from these pictures. So a lot of farmers are subscribing this simply because they like to see pictures from their field. And there needs to be a little better communication and number crunching from these companies, in my view. Another area that is growing in the big ag tech world is that of asset management. So you can imagine that this is being sold to ag companies that have a lot of assets that they need to manage. So these packages are usually revolve around, say, a tablet that's attached to an employee or a piece of equipment. They are GPS enabled, and they stream data that sort of track the path of that machinery, how much fuel and energy they're using, where they're going. You can track employees in the same way to monitor productivity as one example. These are being sold, to improve efficiencies. And again, these are being marketed as a subscription-based service. So looking ahead, where do I see us going? Well, pretty much the route that we've been on. We'll continue down the road of GPS-based tractor driving that will drive this sort of boom in self-driving and even robotic tractors. So self-driving tractors are generally those where an operator sits in the cab and monitors, but does not really have to drive, as you saw in the video. But it's even moving forward to robotic tractors, as you can see in this photo, where there is no operator present. These tractors are just planting this field all by themselves. But I think we're going to go in this area of more robotic machinery and implements being implemented across fields. And there are even robotic weeders. There are a lot of people working on that. And I'll come back to that thought a little later. We're seeing some advancements made in the electrification and zero emissions type tractors. So following the trend of what we're seeing in cars, chasing the goal of electric tractors rather than diesel driven. We're also seeing advances in pursuit of better AI in agricultural equipment. One example is see and spray technology, which again, I'll show an example of that later. And drones and remote sensing continue to be very popular, but I think poorly utilized in terms of actionable data in the agriculture world. So I want to make a case now of what the problem is with some of these technology packages and how they're being used currently and where I think we need to go. So this is a concept diagram of a project that we were trying to implement in collaboration with a large tech company when I was working at UC Davis. I won't say who the company was, and it was a shame that we never got to move forward with this project idea, but I think it's a good sort of case study of where we need to go. So our goal was to improve irrigation management in a processing tomato production system. The problem we were encountering was that growers are watering on a schedule. So, for example, they would set their irrigation valves to open for, say, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. And it was kind of based on experience. It wasn't based on real-time streaming of data or immediate knowledge of the status of their crops and their soils in terms of moisture content. And so in a lot of cases, they were overwatering, which was a problem because it was an overuse of resources. It was inefficient. It's taxing on the environment, so on and so forth. Some cases, they were underwatering and damaging their yield potential. So we wanted to bring together all the elements of the system, the water system in this tomato field, which is quite complex, and be able to solve for irrigation amount. So if you can think of an algebraic equation, irrigation was X that we were solving for. So we have a bunch of factors to consider in this equation. One is precipitation, water deposition on the field. So that's water in, and then we have a lot of sources of water out. There's water coming out of the plants via evapotranspiration. There's water evaporating from the soil surface, and then there's water moving down the soil profile as deep percolation. Now, we do have sensors that can measure all of these things. That's not the problem. We know how to measure these things. The sensors are relatively cheap. The problem is being able to integrate all of the data from these different sensors, install them properly in the field, get them streaming data in real time to one platform or one brain. And then we needed that software to be able to crunch all that data and spit out our irrigation amount recommended. And that would enable the grower to make here, as you see in our layers, We had the tech layer, the raw data that was sensor streaming. That data had to be crunched to enable growers to make a crop management decision. And then that would let the grower make economic decisions that would ultimately benefit the bottom line of their farm by having access to more information and more data. You might be surprised to find that this process does not currently exist for growers. It seems like a no-brainer that that's where we need to go. But I think that is the goal that we've arrived at. We've made a lot of advancements in sensor technology, in raw data streaming technology, but we still need the collaborations between tech companies and agricultural scientists to be able to turn all of this data into actionable decisions. And then we need to be able to collaborate with growers to develop a good, strong interface that has high usability and that is spitting out information that's relevant to growers. So that's my case of where we need to go. So we'll just keep that in mind as I propose more technology throughout this. And all of that's really about turning raw data into actionable decisions, which has a number of implications for use. So now we've come to the challenges part of the presentation, where I want to describe the challenges that a lot of our agricultural community is facing, which are probably relatively foremost in your mind with the recent COVID challenges and challenges for our societal food security. So even before COVID, growers were facing low commodity prices. Due to a number of dynamics, world supply of a lot of commodity crops has gone up as agricultural technology has improved worldwide. We also have policy issues like trade wars putting pressure on commodity prices. This was an ominous quote from a grower even before COVID last year. It's going to be a tough year. There are no two ways about it. As we saw commodity prices fall, that means growers are getting lower prices for their products. And it puts pressure on them to increase supply to be able to make the profits that they have aimed to make, to pay the land rent bills, their equipment bills, and to sustain their livelihoods. We also have changing consumer demand. So there was a $1.1 billion drop in dairy sales in 2018, as this article denotes. We have changes in consumption patterns across society. As I mentioned, there's increasing supply and pressure from abroad has driven down export prices and orders and volumes that our growers are getting for soybeans. And then again, here's a description of how demands are changing and putting pressure on our food processors and our food companies. So more demand for gluten-free products, for example. These are sort of some of the labels that we're seeing. Certified organic demand is going up, and then sort of we're changing our tastes in terms of how our foods are formulated. And that's putting pressure on our food processors, which are then forcing growers who they contract with to change the way they produce prices. Growers are also being put on the hook to answer for a lot of the environmental problems that have come from agriculture and other processes in our society. Growers are being held to account more for water pollution from over-application of fertilizers. This is a surface water stream that has had too much phosphorus deposition in it from runoff from adjacent fields. That phosphorus leads to oxygen depletion in surface waters, which leads to greater algal growth and death of fish and other wildlife using that stream because of anoxia, or lack of oxygen. We also have big soil erosion problems. Some over-application of nitrogen fertilizers to ensure high yields has led to the pollution of a lot of wells in Wisconsin. So wherever there's a red square here, and even the dark red, those are all wells that exceed the allowable nitrate concentration. And it's recommended that people not drink water from those wells. And I think that's a situation that we don't want to happen. We want people to be able to have access to healthy, clean drinking water wherever they may live. And the agricultural industry should be held account for this. So we need to change our ways. We're facing issues of air pollution from application of pesticides, which can drift far distances and harm children and anyone breathing the air. Issues from over-tillage leading to soil erosion. and also huge concerns about biodiversity loss as increasingly worldwide acreages are being converted from natural and wild lands to agricultural lands. So huge challenges both nationwide and worldwide, and I think it's time that we start to think about how technology can start to improve some of our agricultural management practices and to contribute to solutions for these environmental challenges. We're also facing a lot of social challenges, obviously, in the nation right now, but rural communities have been grappling with huge social changes for the last 2 to even 3 decades since the land crisis of the 1980s. Rural America is shrinking, so this shows the population change here. Obviously, it's decreased dramatically, again, over the past 3 decades. That has meant that rural towns decline. There are fewer people living in rural areas, sustaining other businesses and other services there. And it's led to a lot of farm centralization and consolidation and less people being involved in agriculture, which is part of the decoupling of people from their food system. And that's part of the issues of the lack of knowledge and information people have from how their food is produced. However, this may be changing with all that's gone on recently. Perhaps this recent revolution of working from home may be leading to greater demand of people being able to live in these rural areas. So that could reinvigorate some of the interest in food production and agriculture society-wide. However, that leads me to the number one thing that farms and rural communities need is an expansion and an improvement in rural broadband. For all of these technological solutions to work, we need farmers to be able to have good networks, to be able to stream that data. And there are huge issues with that. And I know that even in California, home of Silicon Valley, rural broadband was an issue. And it was preventing a lot of farmers from investing in sort of network or cloud-based solutions because they didn't have access to Wi-Fi or even good 4G. So that's my, while I'm on the soapbox here, I want to ask you to advocate for rural broadband in your communities, to your representatives, both state and federal. We need an expansion of rural broadband for any of this technology to work. All right, so where are we going? I sort of have described the status quo here. We can continue down the road of conventional and industrial agriculture expansion as we have done. This area of our food system is based on a continued increase of production, productivity, and yields, based on increased efficiency. As prices go down, growers have to produce more units to meet their profit margins. And that requires increases in efficiency, which, as I covered, that's driven a lot of the technologies that are being marketed to growers right now. These trends have driven centralization and consolidation so that we end up with fewer farms and fewer farmers operating larger acreages. Underpinning this whole system is this technology that we've made huge strides in over the past two decades. And that technology revolution has been based on better plant breeding and genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, as I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with that debate. It's been based on chemicals and the use of herbicides and pesticides, and also on huge gains in machinery. What about the other side? And this has been sort of the organic revolution that's taken place. The other way we can go from our current status quo is organic, local, and regenerative. Often these types of operations are trying to capture higher margin markets, hence the higher prices for organic products. We're asking these types of systems to provide ecosystem services. So that means that we're expecting organic farms to contribute to better soil health, to filter our water so that we're producing healthy, non-polluted water that's going into our groundwater and our surface waters. We're expecting these to provide habitat for wildlife. We're expecting them to provide healthy recreation spaces for society. So that's an example of what ecosystem services means. We talk about this a lot in the sustainable agriculture world. You can imagine that these systems therefore require and come with a higher degree of integration and complexity than these systems do. And as I mentioned, this side is associated with larger and fewer farms, but this side here, they tend to have more smaller farms. There's more farms, so a larger number, and there's more farmers. And so these two areas, you can see they might require different business models for companies working in each space. The big question is, what kind of tech can we develop that can underpin and support this type of system? So now that brings me to what I see are growing needs in sustainable and organic agriculture. I've divided this into 3 different areas. The first is what I see as being marketing and compliance assistance that growers need more technological solutions for. Then we can also develop tech that can support improved productivity and better yields for organic growers, which is something that organic agriculture gets criticized for a lot. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we need technology to help improve the environmental impact that our food system has. And I think we can make a big case for investment in this area, as demand for organic and regenerative grown products has grown enormously on the consumer side. So the most recent data available from 2018 shows that organic sales were up 6.3%. That's pretty decent growth in one sector, and that is growth that has been sustained over the past decade or so. As this chart depicts the total US growth in organic sales, you can see it continues to go up pretty linearly. Produce tends to be the most popular category, followed by dairy products. After that would be probably demand for organic feed grains to support the organic meat market. Certified organic meat and poultry and other animal products does require farmers to feed certified organic grains. Thus far, a lot of those grains have been imported, and there are a lot of issues with that, as you can imagine. So I think the organic world right now is really trying to expand production of organic feed grains. Apart from certified organic, there are other labels emerging. You might have heard of a more recent term called regenerative agriculture. So a coalition of companies, or there's an alliance between Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, and Roto Institute, who are leading the Regenerative Organic Alliance that have developed that ROC label, which I'll come back to a little bit later. So it's not just organic we're talking about. There are other alternative marketing strategies for agriculture that is more responsive to people and the environment. So there are large farms. I don't want to obscure that fact. They tend to be in California that are organic. You'll probably have seen the Cal Organic label. I visited them. They're enormous. They're down here in Southern California, east of LA. They operate tens of thousands of acres, and California itself has over 1.1 million acres that are certified organic. Overall in the US, there are more than 14,000 certified organic farms, and we're sitting in the #2 state in terms of the number of organic farms. Wisconsin and New York both have more than 1,000 organic farms among them. So there's a pretty large market here of operators. These labels come with compliance, and they get inspected yearly for certified organic, and I think it's the same for the ROC label as well. In order to pass these inspections and audits, certified organic growers need to keep track of all of the receipts for all the inputs that they purchase. That includes seed labels, any chemicals that are organic approved that they might apply. They need to keep track of tests for manure and other organic inputs. They need to maintain maps yearly and over the life of their operation that show where they applied every single product, where they're growing each crop, and then they need to keep track of the dates of all of the operations. You can imagine that's a lot of information, especially as your farm starts to grow and expand beyond just a couple acres or beyond different operators. There is a lot of need for software to help certified organic farmers keep track of all of these different pieces of information. I know that the software exists out there for, say, reimbursement of travelers for companies, where you take a picture of your receipt and it's automatically uploaded into a system. I think that type of software needs to be developed for growers, because when you're out in the field, you'll get a receipt, you'll stuff it in your pocket, and then it's really hard to remember that's there after a long day of work, and it might go through the wash. That has happened to me for sure. So really, we need software and digital solutions for this. Same for the rock label. And as we get into regenerative ag, it gets even more complex. They're required to track their soil health through soil tests and other types of observations. And then there are also requirements around animal welfare and farm worker welfare and fairness standards. And those start to get more fuzzy. How do we keep track of those? These regenerative agricultural operations often, as I mentioned, they have livestock on them. That's one requirement in some cases. There is some technology around monitoring and tracking animal activities on farms. This is an example of an ear tag that is GPS in it. This company is marketing these ear tags as enabling easy animal identification instead of them just having a number written on their ear tag. I guess it sort of is like a microchip that one would have in their pet. They're claiming that these ear tags can be able to detect the physiological status of the animal, which can inform better breeding decisions. They can also inform lameness detection, so you can see when they might have foot issues and need health treatments, and so on and so forth. However, you can imagine if you had a herd of 50 to 100 cows and each of them has a GPS tracker of all their different movements, that is a lot of data. I don't think as a person you could sit down and look at the map of those animal movements and be able to elucidate any of these things. So there must be software coming with this. The interpretability of that software and some of these interfaces I know is a challenge for growers. And so again, this is another example of how technology companies need to work with growers to develop good, strong interfaces that enable good management decisions. So really, it's not the collection of this data that I think is important and needs attention, but it's on the digestion and synthesis side. Moving on to people, there are labels that address farm worker and social equity and social justice issues. So this is the EFI, Equitable Food Initiative label. It says responsibly grown, farm worker assured. They have all of these standards that farms need to meet. So there must be some technology that can help these operations better document these, and that can help farm workers ensure that they are protected at their workplaces. On the marketing side, there is a need for technology in the food processing arena to better enable food processing operations to practice identity preservation labeling. And here are some pictures that are a good example of this. Here we have some pasta that actually have the farm where that grain was produced to make the pasta. If you are producing food at any type of large scale, you're probably aggregating or sourcing ingredients from different farms. So this requires a lot of tracing to be able to put these labels on packages with any accuracy. Same here with dairy. This is saying the farm right where this gallon of milk came from. Most dairy processing plants are mixing and aggregating volumes of milk from many farms. So these require some pretty advanced processing streams. And as Mary reminded me during a talk, we were talking about track and trace. So these are perhaps two sides of the same coin. But in terms of being able to track and trace ingredients throughout the whole food processing stream, it's important and requires technology and has big implications for ensuring food safety and traceability to be able to ensure that outbreaks do not occur. Pathogen and foodborne illness outbreaks, I mean. So this sort of track and trace technology is out there, and I think that it can be implemented on organic food and sustainable food processing arenas. There's a need for that as well. But now I want to move on to the productivity side, and we want to look at weed control because controlling weeds remains the biggest challenge for organic and non-chemical farms. And we really need better technology solutions because traditional mechanical weeding has relied on just people being able to look back at an implement and drive straight. So this is a picture of a cultivator, which are still relied on in the vast majority of non-chemical farms. And that's where you see these hoes. You quite simply, you set these rows between your rows of crop and you drive and you make sure that your hoe doesn't hit your crop. So in order to do that without any technology, this operator has to crane their neck, look back at the hose and make sure that they're driving properly. In an even older solution, these were built for it, so they actually have the cultivator right here in front. So no neck craning, but obviously this is not where we want to go if we want to expand organic production, though I am fond of antique tractors. Let's see if this video plays a little faster. This is an example of a finger weeder. These fingers go right up against the crop row. Oh, it's thinking. Let's see. You might not need to play this video. Let's see as it loads. So this is a little bit more advanced than keeping a hoe in between rows. They've developed this finger weeder. Let me mute here before we play. They've developed a finger weeder that gets right up against the row here. See, so that's an improvement. Before, a cultivator just hits right between the row here because you can't get right up next to your crop. This goes right up against the row. However, you see this is a walk behind implement. So still, there's not too much. And now he's demonstrating how it did a nice job in row. But again, there's no technology here. There's no GPS. It's all being manually operated. See if we can move on here. All right, this is a bit of an advancement here, though this is obviously for chemicals. Let me get this video playing here. This is an example of weed seeker tech, and this is that see and spray technology. And this is using technology at a pretty high level. And these have been in existence for 5 to 10 years, and they are used a little bit out west, as far as I'm aware. And these are used, see, they're driving across a field and this boom is seeing a weed. And once it sees green, it's shooting down. Let me see. Oh, it's loading. It's shooting a ray of light down that can bounce back, hit the sensor, detect green where those weeds are, and then open the nozzle valve, which is to use a jet of spray. The beauty of this is they're not applying the chemical across the entire field where it's not needed. So we're decreasing our costs of herbicide application, and we're also decreasing the amount of chemicals applied across the landscape. So this is more efficient. The issue with this type of system is once we have any green crops growing there, it's only seeing green. It's not being able to distinguish between crop species and other species. So we need to, let's see, well, show my animation. We need better technology that can actually identify different weed species, be able to differentiate them from our crop species, and then target those for control. There are companies working on this, and they're using machine learning techniques to teach machines what different crop species or weed species look like. But then that needs to be integrated with different control solutions. This is a chemical sprayer, so you might not want to use that in an organic or non-chemical context, but there are other implements that could be outfitted with these types of systems, such as a flame weeder, which uses heat and flame to control weeds. There are even robotic weeders that can make decisions on the fly. This is a mini guy. I wanted to show this picture. This is pretty cool. And I think this is a robot. So you can send this out, and this must be GPS enabled to drive between the row. This video is an example of a company that is developing some nascent technology around certain plant species detection and control. Let's see. Apologies for these videos being slow loading. Here we go. And they're also calling this see and spray technology. And Blue River is out in California. And they're calling this precision weed control, and they can actually control weeds within a crop stand, which you'll be able to see if this loads. This video is a little dramatic, but here they're detecting so the technology was able to differentiate this weed from the roast crops seed, and then that is communicating with the tractor. I think that was remote sensing that I showed you. Then this tractor goes through and then targets those weeds for control. I think using that chemical that had a green dye. So there are advancements being made in that space. Again, the trick is how do we implement those solutions on a smaller farm, though, again, or on larger organic farms, or how do you sort of change the marketing of those to target organic and alternative farmers? Okay, so moving on to intercropping. This is where we grow more than one crop at a time. This is a picture of an intercropping trial that I did as part of my PhD work in Washington State, where I was growing peas and wheat in the same field for a variety of reasons. This is another picture. In Canada, intercropping is really starting to take off. The Canadians have made a lot of progress in this area. In this field, they're growing barley and oat together. So here are the oats, here are the barley. You can see them in this picture. This is what the harvested grains look like. So they're a little bit different in size, but you can imagine when you go through and harvest this with a combine, you get all of these seeds mixed up in one hopper. Here's another picture. They're growing oil seeds and peas and I think oats all in one system. So the issue is we need to be able to sort out these products for marketing purposes. Looks like this video might load a little faster. There are some solutions out there, though they are currently this would be and how these things work. So this is where, as the grains fall, again, there's a light sensor. It's bouncing light off of the falling product. Due to the reflective level, they can detect when of the grain, and then this little issues the jet of air instantaneously in real time as they fall to kick those products out. Standard accepted and easy for body. You can also detect which can get picked up and even shape them. So this is being deployed for sorting right now, but this exact same technology could be used for sorting out products from intercropped systems of different shapes, sizes, and colors. All right, so let's move on. That technology just needs to be re-outfitted and adapted to alternative systems. Another area that I see as being important environmentally is that of waste management. These are some pictures of our composting industry. There's enormous interest, growing interest in compost, and compost is widely utilized on non-chemical farms that are choosing not to use chemical fertilizers. Compost is being produced at large scales, as you can see in this picture, and there are even municipal composting projects. Seattle gives you a compost bin along with your recycling and trash bins, and they have weekly pickup through their waste management. So that's giving us a lot of compost that ends up having a lot of heterogeneous feedstocks. And there are a lot of questions about how do we process this really heterogeneous material. Again, back to that higher complexity in organic systems. And we need to employ perhaps some of that sorting and sifting technology that I just showed to be able to process and sort this and make sure that it's clean. And then we need a lot of software and logistics technology to be able to move and process this compost and deploy it across broad landscape scales. I'll make a plea to you all to think about plastic in the food system and what an enormous problem it is causing environmentally. You might be surprised to learn that plastic is widely utilized on organic farms. When you see these sort of plastic mulch systems, that's a pretty handy solution to our weed management issues on organic farms. But a lot of this plastic is not recyclable, or even if it is, there aren't many recyclers around to process that. And so really, you know, we need solutions to either process or engineer new materials and new waste management streams for those. Or we need to deploy some more robotic weeding technologies. There's also, what about our packaging? We need innovations in the materials engineering space and processing space as well. There are solutions out there. I found this is a new PDK. It's a recyclable plastic that's been developed at Berkeley. And so I just encourage everyone in the technology world to start to think about solutions that improve efficiencies in our economic bottom line, but that are also making environmental improvements. And in that way, it can be a win-win-win for technology companies, growers, and our society. So my take-home messages for you all are that the organic and alternative and sustainable agricultural world needs software applications that can pull data together from different streams and processes and then make them easily interpretable for growers. These new systems need to handle heterogeneity and complexity to a greater degree than solutions that have been deployed thus far on larger and more conventional farms. These new solutions probably need to be subscription-based, and they need to rely on a marketing model that is low cost for individual growers and operations, but then gain profits through obtaining a high user and client base. And then there's a great need for more marketing and communication-based applications to be able to connect organic and sustainable growers with each other and with the community. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. And after this talk, I'm happy to answer any questions or continue the dialogue. And here's my email if you'd like to contact me directly. So right. Thanks so much. I don't know if we have time.
We do have a few questions for you.
I am still here.
We do have a few questions for you. The first question is, are these systems that you're mentioning open source or closed source systems? And what role can open source play in ag innovation?
Can you, this is a question about open source versus closed. I don't exactly speak tech language. Aunt Mary, do you think you could reword that for me?
Yes, I can. So really it's referring to the technology using algorithms that are available in open source. So lots of times when scientists develop these algorithms, they can publish them up to places like Model Zoo or other libraries where the algorithms used to do that analysis could be available for other technologies. So for example, the video that you were showing that identified different colors of plant material to identify what it is, that's an algorithm that's built into a mathematical model. And then those algos are either published as open source or they're invented as a proprietary system. So I think the question was related to that, and I'm not sure that you would actually know the answer to that question. I think that's more you know, to the software provider that actually wrote that, whether it's proprietary or if they did use models, or alternatively, anyone who's interested in developing software like that could do a search in those open source models to find algos that might fit the use case that you're trying to solve for. But I think that anyone who's interested in doing that might be interested in talking with you about some of the characteristics. So you would be able to provide the domain expertise, whereas the technology provider needs to help with that technology side. So did that answer your question, Peter? He'll have to text in. Hopefully it did.
Yeah, he'll have to text that in.
Yeah.
While we wait, we'll look for one more question here. How can technical solutions improve farm worker experiences?
Oh, great. Okay. I'll answer this and then I'll come back to the other question because I wanted to say something there too. How can technology improve farm worker experiences? I think a lot of the problems that we encounter with farm worker experiences is that they have not had great access to information about how to protect themselves. And we're having a big conversation. PPE has never been more present in the wider societal conversation as now. And so we all know about PPE now, and farm workers really need access to a lot of PPE. Even on organic farms, there are still some chemicals that are organic approved, but that are dangerous to the applicator. And in a lot of cases, especially out west and in the south, our farm workers, English may not be their first language. And so a lot gets lost in translation in terms of these farm workers knowing the proper procedures to protect themselves when applying chemicals, when operating equipment, those sorts of things. And so I think a lot of what we need there is translation services and maybe easy little software apps that walk a person through how to put on PPE, how to safely operate a tractor. Really simply, we need a lot more training videos for folks that are available in a number of different languages. You'd be surprised how those things don't exist right now, and a grower doesn't have the resources to contract with a company, to make such a thing. So the solution's there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in that space, I think. And there are a number of farm worker advocacy organizations that would love to be a part of that conversation. And I'm sure the Equitable Food Initiative folks would love to talk with companies interested in working in that space, and they are very responsive. I've had some communication with EFI, so feel free to get in touch with them. In terms of the last question, thanks. I think the closed source threw me off. I've never heard of that, but I've certainly heard of open source applications and code. And as somebody who was raised in an academic world, I would say that we are moving full steam ahead with open source code and open access code. A lot of that has been developed in sort of the publicly funded institutions like universities, the government. We're actually required to post everything open access, everything we develop, especially if it came from a federally funded grant. So there's a lot out there that has been developed by public researchers from a number of arenas. The vast majority of companies are using proprietary code and technology, I think, and that should be a conversation about, I have opinions about this. I do think that we would all get ahead if everything were open source, but I understand why proprietary solutions have been maintained. But I know that there's a lot of open access and open source material out there that is ready to be harvested.
I'll comment on that actually, Nikki, because just a couple of weeks ago we had another Thoughtful Thursday lecture on open standards, and so there's actually, I mean, there's lines of delineation here, right? The algorithms that do the analysis of the color of the plant, for example, might be built into a software tool that offers value add, because while it can recognize the color, there's still some other compute or action that needs to take place, right? So that's the proprietary part of the software, and it's relying on these algorithms, which are actually part of artificial intelligence development to apply to the different scenarios that are trying to be assessed. But that's actually a different topic than this idea of open source and the ability to being able to interact with other software tools and business systems through standard communications and protocols. And the industry is really demanding this, end users, because they want the agility to plug and play technology as specialist applications wherever it's most needed, and without the need to rewrite all kinds of APIs or do all sorts of complex interfacing actions which weigh down and impede agility when you want to change out to something else, right? So when you talk about like open not necessarily open source, but open protocols, being able to communicate. This is very much an industry driver, so we should be clear about, you know, algorithms. Many are posted open, but they can still be applied in tool sets that offer monetization opportunities for those who are creative and want to invent them. So thank you for all that. Good questions.
Great questions. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Dr. Talkis, and all our guests for your great questions and active participation. We'll be posting the recording from today's session on the CSI website events page. You can access it there shortly. I'll invite you to tune in on Thursday, June 18th, when we'll hear from Bala Balakrishnan from Microsoft. The art of maintenance touches every aspect of our lives, but when it is applied on a scale necessary to support a multinational heavy equipment manufacturer transform their maintenance and operation strategy, that's a story to tell. Understanding this history helps us understand the future evolution that that digitalization journeys will take us as we learn about more ways to apply it. Join us as Microsoft, a partner of UW-Milwaukee, presents the compelling topic, One Man's Journey Through the Evolution of Asset Management to Smart Manufacturing, an hour-long webinar brought to you by the UWM Connected Systems Institute. Please register for this event at uwm.edu/CSI/events. My name is Charles Mosley, signing off for today. Thank you all for attending.